morning. Oh, I'll get feet. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Social Media Week London Hub, sponsored by Google+. It's very nice to have you here. And if you've been to lots of events this week, or any of the, I think, 5 massive parties last night, well done for looking so chipper. Apparently I'm looking all right this morning, which is amazing because I feel like I'm going to die, but it's good. And we've got a really, really good panel lined up for you. But this is Social Media Week. So it's important to be social, not just online, as we've been discussing. It's not just about tweeting each other inside the room, which will probably happen. So can we take a couple of minutes, just introduce yourself to the person sitting next to you, so that you know at least one person during the week. Red's on the side. Alrighty, so I hope everybody's had a good introduction, and I'll have the usual problem that once everybody starts talking, it's quite difficult to get everyone to stop talking. Oh, that worked though. Thank you very much. Well, hopefully, so you've met at least 1 or 2 other people, so you've done your networking, unlike what a friend of mine calls it, not working. It's proper work. Results will come. My name's Sam Michelle from Chinwag. We're the lead organisers of Social Media Week London. And I'm largely here to do all the boring announcements about the session. So firstly, there is Wi-Fi in here. It does get a bit flaky, although we should be all right this morning. The password is forum2011 in lowercase. We've already killed Design 2. Don't try and connect to that one. Design 1 and 3 are on their last legs, but we should get through to the end of the session without any problems. The hashtag for this session is SMWSocialBiz. If you have chunky fingers and a small phone, SMWLDN is a perfectly acceptable alternative. And the more you engage with the panel, the better the panel will be. Although, to be fair, it's a pretty good panel. So I'm not going to introduce them. I'm going to hand over to Will McInnes, who is chairing the session, and we'll get things kicked off. Will, over to you.
Hello. So I'm just going to kind of set the scene very briefly and then introduce the panel. I really second what Sam said. We want this to be really interactive. So when we get to the Q&A bit, please, like, the more questions you ask us and challenge these people here, the better the result will be for all of us. So I think, we're here to talk about social business, and one of the things that we can end up getting caught up with when terminology arrives is dissecting and trying to come up with some sort of perfect definition. Rather than come up with a perfect definition of what social business is or is about, let's just consider the world. So I think, if you think about the world that we're living in today, think about the world that's out there outside of this cosy, warm design council room. You think about the financial crisis, you think about the ongoing recession, think about rioting in Greece, unemployment in young people in the UK, think about the spiraling environmental crisis in the world. Think about the Arab Spring. Think about the change in global balance of power, the decline of the US, the rise of BRIC. Think about Generation Y and the difference that they bring into the workforce, their desire for dialogue, their hatred of command and control, their desire for meaning. And if you think about the internet and the connectivity that is flowing now between previously unconnected people. And if you think about that and break that down into themes, you think about the shift towards a real-time world, a world where Whitney dies and we all know within seconds, or a plane lands in the Hudson River, or something else important happens. And we know in seconds. You think about the rise of people power, the shift towards the empowerment of connected groups of people. You think about networks and their prevalence and their rise and their rise. You think about dialogue and the shift from broadcast to dialogue and how that continues, and how TV now is like a second screen experience, how we get to talk back, we get to petition, we get to challenge, we get to leave hateful, spiteful reviews of bad restaurants and irritating builders. You think about that global connectivity and the fluid working patterns that we all have in our lives now. And practically speaking, you think about restaurant reviews, builders, the photos that you can access through Creative Commons on Flickr, the incredible resource that is Wikipedia. And so then think about business. And then think about, are the 20th century modes of business and structures and patterns and behaviours and norms, are they the right ones? Is that really what business is going to be about in the 21st century? No fucking way. So that, for me, is social business. That is what we're here to talk about. We will be practical. We will be much more practical than that. We will talk about technology. We will talk about getting there, the journey, the steps, the people, the barriers. But that is what we're aiming for. So we're going to talk about barriers, shortcuts, practical steps. I'd like to introduce the panel and then hand over to them because they're what's going to make this work. So we've got Adrian from WWF, who's going to be talking about his experiences working inside an organisation and how that's become more social. Simon from Adobe will be relating his experiences about how a company with thousands of people spread across different geographies collaborate and communicate internally. Then we've got Anaban from Nokia, who will be talking about similar challenges and a really interesting case study that they've got around kind of moving towards that. And then Ewan, who's an author, check out his book. We'll be talking about some of the kind of people aspects. How do you get people, it's all very well getting stuff in place. How do we get adoption to happen? What does it do to the power dynamics between people in organisations? What does feedback look like, and how do we have meaningful conversations? And then we're going to hand over to you for hopefully a lively discussion, so please do challenge us. And introverts, please speak up. Often you have much better questions than us extroverts could ever consider coming up with. So first off, Adrian Cockle from WWF. If we could have an encouraging round of applause.
Thanks, Will. Let me get my slides up.
The wonders of technology in the 21st century.
Just in case any of you are wondering, it's the pandas, not the wrestlers. Oops. Okay, just a bit of context. We are one of the foremost global environmental organisations around the world. We have about 1,300 conservation projects going on at any one time, about 2,500 staff around the world. I'm responsible for the digital activity in the UK. We've got 350 staff around 4 offices. We're based out in the sticks of Godalming, which is a real pain for recruitment. So I guess the question that I'm here to try and describe to you how we try to answer it today is, how do you make this huge organisation feel like a startup? So, as Will was saying, there's a lot of different ways of approaching this. I'm going to talk a little bit about tools to start with. This is our old intranet. It was first built about 10 years ago, the beige beauty. Very old school, very one-to-many. There was an intranet editor who was the bottleneck to any content going up here. It's kind of very, well, I hate to say this, but it's Web 1.0. So, a couple of years ago when we started planning to replace it, we were looking at the broad shifts. I know Web 2.0 is a bit of a dirty word these days. It just becomes how you do things. But some of the key themes in that were this shift from formal to informal, dictated to owned, and those tablets of stone handed down from on high to those water cooler moments. So, set against that shift, you look at the Encyclopaedia Britannica, which these days is this sort of anachronistic remnant, which is now replaced by the glory of Wikipedia. So we thought, well, we're talking about an intranet, which is about sharing knowledge. We should do this. So we were looking at a number of options. We looked at MediaWiki, the software behind Wikipedia. We looked at a custom solution. We looked at your more traditional CMS. But the one we chose in the end is this product called Confluence from a company called Atlassian. It's a really sweet product. It's very enterprise in that sort of social space. It's got Active Directory integration, single sign-on, granular permissions, all those things that really encourage IT directors, which is pretty important when you're getting buy-in for this kind of project. Also, really importantly, it's got a very vibrant third-party plugin development scene. So you, as a charity, we have, don't have the money that some of the other organisations represented here do. So we're reliant on the generosity of others, including those open source software developers. Atlassian themselves are one of those lovely companies that give their software to non-profits for free. So in case they're watching, thanks. So for this kind of project, you need people. You can't do it in that sort of old school top-down way. So we had a group of 40 people from all around the organisation that we call the Grapevine. So these are the people doing, that sort of very traditional content movement. So doing the migration into a new platform, making sure the right things are there, making sure we cull the old stuff. But most importantly, when you're talking about this kind of thing, they become your choir. They become your group of advocates. So having these people involved early, way beyond before the soft launch, we had 10% of the organisation using this tool when it was still in that sort of real ugly duckling stage, where they see all the faults and flaws and they give you that direct feedback. It was only right at the very end that we sort of brought the visual skin together with the meat and potatoes of the content underneath it. So these guys had a tough time. Obviously, any kind of project, whether it's online, offline, you want to think about personas. So we had our receptionist, Mary. What would Mary do? The least technical person you've ever met. Bless her, she's lovely. But by keeping that in mind, you think, well, if Mary's approaching something, how would she do it? Would she get what, tagging and a folksonomy are? Well, no, of course she wouldn't. So how do we describe it to her? So a lot of the things I want to talk about are sort of increasing acceptance. So this was our old website at the time. This is a couple of years ago now. It's changed a bit since then. So when we launched our new intranet, we tried to make it look pretty similar. So key thing to point out, donate now, pretty important for a charity. So most important thing on the page. So for us, we just go into an internal context. How do our FAQs? Again, acceptance. What we wanted to show is that this isn't about dry policy information. This isn't about, this is that sort of shift to owned rather than dictated. I spent 5 minutes walking around. We get this, I don't know if anyone else has it, this thing of, people have their own mugs, which they're very possessive about. Yeah, I see nods. And people lose those mugs, and then they send emails asking if anyone's seen those mugs. So I thought, there's a better way. So I went round about 5 minutes with my camera phone, taking photos of people's mugs on their desks, and just chucked them straight up into a page on our intranet arena. So now, those big boxes of crockery in the kitchens that say, these are the lost mugs. Now they say, go to Arena, search for mug shots and see if someone's mug is up there. Indicators of success. You've got your numbers, but sometimes it's the stories, it's the anecdotes. This was a lovely moment when I saw that someone had taken loads of photos of one of our staff summer parties and put them up on Arena without going through the Intranet Manager. They just figured the tool out. It's really easy to use, but it's just that, people get it, this is nice. And then it gives you a little story to tell other people in the organisation who maybe aren't getting the quite the same level of acceptance. We did a bit of in-house development as well. So we did a little journey sharing app using Google Maps, pretty quick. And it just gives people that context that this isn't, as I said, isn't just about dry policy stuff. This is about your lifestyle. This is about how you get to the office as well. And it gives you that sort of person-to-person communications. Interesting little side topic. As I was putting this presentation together, I screenshotted it, and I realised that there's a bike in there. No idea why. I don't really think we should be endorsing people giving backies to work. Alongside Arena, we also use Yammer. This is one of those sort of classic examples of something starting as a little R&D project, very much within the online team. There's 8 of us in the online team. So we thought, we use this and we can do our little online weekly updates, rather than writing formal Word documents. You just put a little, a bit longer than a tweet every week saying what you've been up to, and they then get collated and passed off to my boss. But I don't know if anyone uses Yammer, but it's got a really, really viral sign-up process. So you sign up, and it says, okay, now can you complete your org chart? And so you get people filling in other people's email addresses and they get invites. So then IT started getting a bit nervous. They were like, Adrian, what's this thing that everyone's asking us about? It's like, yeah, I kind of should have talked to you about that. So we couldn't be bothered going with the paperwork because it's quite heinous. So it's just kind of under the radar still. But now it's become this international de facto tool. As all those other offices around the world are all going, oh no, we love Yammer. So now we're trying to have to figure out how we sort of fit it back. So bringing it back to lessons learned, what did we do or what did we not do that we should have done? I think the key things are getting the right people in the room to make the right decisions at the right times. You know, any digital projects I find, you get this lots of people go, oh, that's really exciting and sexy, can I be involved? And it's like, that's great, but actually, you know what? We need a small focus group of decision makers who can do this. We had a certain amount of internal lobbying, you know, sending those interesting little links that happen to support your point of view to the right people at the right time. So they're kind of coming into the next meeting with the right viewpoint. I think it's not all hearts and flowers. You know, it's great standing up here and giving a case study of, oh, yeah, we're doing fantastically. But we now have a file server, we have an intranet, we have Yammer, we have email, and we're now finding people going, what do I do? How do I find something? Where do I put something? How do I develop this policy document? And these are the problems we're having at the moment. And, you know, alongside that, duplication of content. I mean, these are absolute nightmare issues. But the questions it's raising are really interesting ones. So as we're being more social internally, we're training our staff to be more social externally. And the next question I think we're going to be asking is, we've got all this information that we're sharing internally. What's the right level to reveal that externally? How do we break down those barriers between inside the organisation and outside the organisation? You know, maybe there's a model for having an intranet which our supporters can get onto. Maybe there's, you know, financial supporters, maybe they're just people that like what we do. There's quite a few of them. I think the other question, it's great that Ewan's here today, because I kind of got this from him, is what's the right signal to noise ratio? What's the sort of policy information versus just bullshit? And I think if you ask certain people in old school organisations, they say, well, it's all business, 100% business. It's not, it's really not. And just as a little example of that, we're lucky enough to back onto a river, and there's invasive crayfish. So being WWF, this is kind of the most WWF page on our intranet. It's talking about the conservation issues of its invasive signal crayfish. And, you know, it talks about, you know, what the problems are, scientific name, all that stuff. And then it goes down to recipes, because we do pull them out and then let staff take them home and cook them. Thank you very much. Okay, next up we've got Simon from Adobe.
Right, let's see. I'll let you do it. So good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone in the room. I feel like I should say good morning to everybody who's watching on the live stream. So good morning. That's mine, yeah. That's good to get to the beginning. So yeah, welcome everyone, and I'm going to try and give you some insight into how Adobe goes about being a social business. So really looking inwards, which is quite a big change from what I'm used to doing, which is talking about essentially how Adobe is using its social analytics product to help companies measure the impact or connect their social media activity to business results. So I'm going to look inwards this time around. Just a couple of words about Adobe. I'm sure you've all heard of Adobe, right? Most of you know Adobe for its creative solutions, its Creative Suite software, which sits on the digital media side of Adobe. There is another part of Adobe, which is a big part of the operation, which is the digital marketing business unit, which is the business unit that I'm in. And the digital marketing business unit has been kind of built over the last few years as a result of some significant acquisitions. I think $2.4 billion of acquisitions. Companies like Omniture in the analytics space, Day Software for content management, and most recently Efficient Frontier, who have the platform for managing your ad spend and executing your ad spend across search, display, and social. So we're very serious about digital marketing and helping our customers kind of manage, optimize, and measure their digital marketing and advertising campaigns. So that's where I'm coming from. I think that when you think about a social business, you really need to look at what are the core values of your organisation. And we've actually got 4 core values. These are 3 of them, but I think it's the 4th one that is, I think, really important in the context of what Adobe is all about, and that's about being involved. It's absolutely at the heart of Adobe that we get our employees, which is around 10,000 people, involved in the business and serving as evangelists for the company. If you want your employees to be involved, you do need to kind of have some structure behind that. So we've established a kind of centre of excellence, which really covers, I guess, cuts across 4 different areas. I can't go into too much detail because I'm supposed to speak for about 5 minutes, but essentially we categorise it into 4 kind of boxes. Firstly is listening, so you kind of putting structures in place as to how best to listen to the community, enabling our employees, empowering them, and finally innovation. So making sure we're helping our customers spread the word by being very transparent with the activities that we're doing, and getting them involved. So they're the kind of 4 areas that drive Adobe's social media centre of excellence. And if you want people to be involved, I'm not sure if you can see that, but we were very open in terms of how to kind of deal with kind of social media, kind of what it means. We have a lot of training, guidelines, and kind of resources. This is on our Inside Adobe intranet. And when every employee joins Adobe, they go through kind of a very structured training plan in their first week, of which social media is a key element of that. So we're making sure they're aware of the power and potential, as well as the kind of the guidelines to help them with that process. And it's not kind of hidden away. It's very much up front in terms of the Inside Adobe intranet. So as much as you can kind of encourage your employees to be involved in connecting with the business, ultimately your social experience, the way to become a social business, is defined by the degree to which you choose to opt in to the discussions and information sharing that takes place. It is about the individuals wanting to be involved and taking advantage of the tools we put in front of them. But we have put a specific tool. We actually built a tool. You can see, when you see "reveal your awesomeness," you can guess which country that kind of statement came from, but it wasn't the UK. But we built Adobe Vibe, which we were looking at different kind of tools that were available on the kind of open market, and there were some concerns around kind of privacy, because we found that a lot of the employees, especially on the technical side, like to kind of talk about kind of pre-releases and product information that was pretty sensitive. So there was a kind of element of kind of concerns about privacy. So we built our own tool using Adobe software, and we called it Adobe Vibe. And it's really been pushed throughout the organisation as a tool to firstly flatten the organisation. So everybody can create a group, everybody can post. There's really there's no restrictions on this tool. It's a great way of bringing groups together around the world. As I said, 10,000 employees spread right around the world, but with common interests in different parts of the business. And it's interesting to see, it's actually the employees that are kind of more remote offices or smaller offices that are really engaged with this tool. So why are some of our employees using it? So firstly, they're kind of using it to share with the rest of their colleagues what they're up to. And they a lot of people tend to be up to some pretty innovative, cool stuff, either with clients or internally. So it's really sharing that information. And for them, a lot of individuals see it as just raising their own personal awareness. When you're in such a big company, you do need to think about marketing yourself, and it's just a great way of doing that. Featuring wins from your department, showcasing customer success, as I mentioned. A lot of people do it just to listen, so they'll kind of join groups that are relevant to a topic area that they find interesting for them, and they'll just kind of observe and listen, and sometimes they'll comment and get involved. So there's all sorts of different ways in which they engage with other employees around the world. The other thing that we do is we really encourage, around certain occasions, so for example, Valentine's Day last week, we just encouraged our employees just to tell the rest of their colleagues why they love Adobe. And sounds really cheesy, and you think who's going to do that? But it was remarkable how many employees just got a camcorder, got a video camera, got their phone, and just filmed a short video and just posted it on YouTube. And just really fun stuff that was made, and people do like that sort of thing, amazingly enough. We also made sure that they could access Vibe on their mobile device, which is obviously key because our employees are extremely mobile. So that was a key part of that. And we have metrics, so it's important to understand. When you've got the tools yourself, we've got our kind of analytics product. We actually use them internally to measure who's engaged with the tool, what parts of it are they using, how many groups are being created, what are the most popular groups, and we kind of use those metrics to kind of crowdsource new ideas for features and functionality. So one of the things that we're currently doing, that we could see that we're getting a lot of feedback about certain elements that are missing from the tool. So we kind of, we're now preparing or piloting a new app which will now combine Vibe with some video, instant messaging, and the Adobe directory, which allows you to kind of quickly and easily find people and see their picture and see where they work and their contact details into one single experience, which is really key. I think you spoke about having lots of different systems. Where do you go to find something? So we're trying to bring as much as possible together into one tool for them to use. The last thing I wanted to mention is this kind of customer listening post, which we've set up. This happens to be in our headquarters in the States, but and this is about listening to what our customers, what our community is saying, not just online through social, but also it could be customer care offline on the phones, tracking emails, but really giving us a lot of visibility into the customer experience. And we enable our employees to bring customers into that listening post to see how we kind of immerse ourselves in the customer experience and really learn where to make improvements. And it's been really well received, both internally and also by our customers. And with that, I'll say thank you very much, and look forward to your questions.
Okay, so hopefully you're starting to think of some questions. Hold on to them, write them down. We'll be there in a minute. Next one is Anaban from Nokia, who's going to relate his experiences working in this area. Can we start with another encouraging round of applause?
Thank you. Thanks for coming. And I have to say hello to the guys who are listening online. I promised my colleague Carla in Dubai and Shalab in Singapore I'd say hi. So hi guys. My name's Anirban Saha. I look after social innovation and intelligence for Nokia for a global team. Now, I'm going to start with a quick pop quiz. Nokia is a pretty old company. We started, I think it was 1863 or something. Now, Nokia employees, I can see a couple of people here. You're not allowed to answer this, but who knows what two products did we launch with? Just shout them out. Yep, and? Correct, and you have won a prize.
Oh, that's
you
outrageous.
won awesome Bluetooth headsets. I have another prize later, so just wait. Okay, so that's just a little warm-up. So my job is really about... It's very similar to what I was saying just before. It's about listening, and my focus is very much that. When I joined Nokia about 2.5 years ago, it was really about how do we listen to the conversations that are happening in online spaces. And when I started, I was given a few tools. Here's an account to Radian 6. Here's a login to Omniture. Go for it. It's like, okay, what am I going to do here? So I did what most people do. You log in, you have a look, you put in some keywords, you see what's going on. You send out a report. Who do I send it to? It's a small niche of people. Okay, people in my team. Find people in another team who have something relevant to it, maybe. Okay, so I'll push them out. But what we tended to find was only a fraction of these people read reports and a fraction of these people get back to you with feedback. So it was about, okay, this isn't working, and very much in the line of social business, it's how do we socialize ourselves, how do we communicate better within our company. Nokia is a pretty big company. We have something in the region of 100,000 employees across about 150 markets, so it's a very difficult task to communicate messages internally. So what we did was we got our heads together within the social team, and we figured that the best way to do this was to essentially broadcast all this information and publish it in our public spaces within Nokia, so in communal areas like in cafes and canteens and employee lounges. So what I'm going to show you is a very quick video, I hope, and one second, and this will explain it way better than I can explain it.
Agora for me starts with the name itself. It was derived or inspired by the Greek meeting place where people came together to discuss things and learn from each other and ultimately go away more knowledgeable. We've built with Agora very much the same thing, to pull conversations, device activity, anything that our consumer base is doing with their Nokia together in a very, very digestible format so that we can learn from that.
The Agora Social Visualizer is located in the heart of our headquarters in Espoo. It's really a physical manifestation of Nokia's commitment to social media. It's the area where we want to bring together all of the various different employees within Nokia to talk, engage and understand the impact that social media is having on our marketing organisation. So from the latest product launch videos to recent campaign films, Window 1 contains all the latest content created by Nokia. But what we wanted to do was bring that into one dedicated window and really allow us to showcase that amazing content. Window 2 highlights the work from our own social channels. So all of the information that's posted onto our Twitter channels, Facebook, various different blogs. A really important area for us that we're having these conversations, they're being responded to, and they're truly having an impact. Moving into Window 3, this is where we really get into the planning and the editorial side of all of our global presences. With so many fans and followers across multiple different networks, it's really important that we have a clear view of what's coming up in the campaign calendar. Window 4, one of my personal favourites. It's where Agora is able to pull together all of the amazing content that's been created by our consumers around the world. They're uploading that into areas such as YouTube, Vimeo, to Flickr. People have taken our technology, they've taken our devices, and then they've really pushed the boundaries in terms of what they can do with it. Window 5 is one of the key pillars of Agora. It's where we start to focus in on specific Nokia products and services, understanding the sentiment and the volume of conversations that are happening. We get to see that visually in a live and unfiltered way. So finally, Window 6. It's an area where we can capture a snapshot of how our brand's performing in social media across the world. Updated every 15 minutes. It's where we're able to see that totally transparent view into how Nokia's brand is performing against competitive brands.
I like the fact that it's not censored in some way. You see the positive and negative comments.
No, I think putting all the screens together actually is the most surprising picture, because you kind of have all these different platforms. You have what people are saying and how they actually feel about Nokia.
Share of conversation, that's something that gives a good snapshot really here, where you see, how did we do overall.
When you're looking at these visualizations, you see what's going on, you see the reactions that the consumers are having, interacting back and closing that feedback loop. That's the ultimate goal.
Nokia's Agora represents a space where people can come together, they can see the conversations that are happening all across the world. So we feel that we've taken the ancient Greek term of Agora and we've really brought that into the 21st century.
Regardless of whether we're selling a device, selling a service, engaging with a consumer throughout their life cycle, or triaging a support issue, every function in Nokia ultimately becomes more empowered through a system like Agora.
So that was our project. Now, let me just pull this in. There we go. Okay. So currently, this, as we mentioned in the video, it sits in our head office in Helsinki, in Espoo, and it's already progressed. This was a few months back last year when we actually launched it. We've already gone to the stage where, okay, it's fine to have it broadcasting, but people say, well, I want that data. So the next step of this, we had to evolve. We've put QR codes on it. People can walk by and scan a chart and take it away with them. The next step to this was, okay, if I'm not even in the building, if I'm out at meetings and things, how do I get this data also? Again, socializing the business, socializing the data. So we've built it in HTML5. So you can now, all our employees can now access this on their tablets, on their PCs, on their mobile phones. Exactly the same content that's fed out to these screens, they can access in their hand. So we think it's really empowered every employee in the company to be able to really go out there and just say, I know what's happening in our social spaces. I'm listening. I know what's happening. So that's what's currently where we're at. We've rolled this out in London and Sunnyvale, and we have a couple of others coming up in Dubai, and I believe India is on the cards next. So we found this is a really effective way of communicating our sort of listening data. Now we have freestanding versions of this as well. We put these up in places in conferences. There's one of these out in New York as well at the moment for the Social Media Week there. And a lot of people just walk by and ask, where do we get this data? They want some of this, and there's actually interest in people purchasing licenses off us for this. So we think we've come up with a real winner on this. There's the desktop, there's the mobile. I won't really go through much else. And now this is something I wanted to talk about. This is our next project. So on top of this sort of listening layer, of course, we want to do something about the data that we're getting in. Okay, we're listening to this. We've heard that there are issues going on. Now, we've come up with an internal product called the Socializer. And what the Socializer is, it's an active engagement platform that we can use internally. And what happens is, when you first log into it, you can pick a select group of keywords. You can pick a Nokia device like the N8. You can pick battery as a keyword. You can pick camera as a keyword. Now, it plugs directly into the same thing that Agora plugs into, which is the Radian 6 API. And what it does is, it'll monitor a regular level of conversation. It'll pick up that sort of conversation noise. And over time, we'll get blips in conversation. Suddenly, people will start talking about, my camera's broken, or this thing has crashed, or the new Lumia 800 has come out, and there'll be a spike in conversation. Now, whenever that happens, if you're logged in with those particular keywords, Socializer will ping you out an email, an SMS, alerting you that there's suddenly a spike in conversation around what you're interested in. Now, this is obviously the next level to just basic listening. It's literally engaging you directly to whatever department you work in. If you're a product manager, if you're in care, if you're in marketing, this is like our vision of like how we're going to really get our staff to really be aware of exactly what's going on very much real time. And the way we've managed this is we've built it in terms of, we built some gamification in, we have a leaderboard, we have badges, everyone gets involved, everyone wants to do their best to show that they're listening. So that's kind of what we're talking about right now, and that's where we're at in terms of engaging with our staff and moving forward. And like any company, we've just got to adopt a change. We've got to move with the times, and technology is one of the ways we're doing this at a global level. But that's because we're a pretty big company. On a much smaller scale, we just encourage people to use things like just use Google Trends. Just get in there, use the free tools that are out there, and certainly, there's a lot of, the internet's a pretty amazing place. You can find a lot of cool stuff. So that's where I'll leave it for there. And to finish with, my final quiz is, it's a number I'm looking for. It's how many Nokia-related conversations do we monitor every month? If you tweet me and with the hashtag Social Media Week London, then I will give a nice shiny new phone to the person who's closest to the number at the end.
Taking it to the next level.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and last but in no means least is Ewan Semple, who's an author and independent consultant in this area. And Ewan's going to be taking a slightly kind of non-case study, more independent stance, and looking at some of the kind of people aspects in particular.
Thank you.
Can we just do one final encouraging round of applause? It's really helpful.
Just give me a blank screen. No,
you don't want that as well. Okay.
Can't believe you're giving away stuff.
Thank you. That's fine. Just leave it. Thank you very much. Yeah, really interesting. I mean, the reason I went last is that I can pick up bits and pieces from the various other speakers. I'm afraid I don't have any videos, and I don't have any phones to give away, or any blue sets either, not even any books. It's really interesting listening to those presentations, because I think there's a vast difference in the types of organisations that we're talking about. We talk about social business, and sometimes are guilty of assuming we mean large corporates. And like last night, I was taking part in a webinar, made that assumption. The first question I got was from somebody who was a dressmaker and was a sole proprietor, and it was her only business, and she was using social tools to build her business. And it got me thinking about the nature of the social web, the fact that it's about conversations, that it's about people, that it's about individuals, and that places big organisations under pressure from two directions. This came out yesterday in a thing I was taking part with JP Rangaswamy, who was very full on about the customer leading this drive, that it was the customers who were becoming social. They were talking about products and companies who didn't understand this, engage with this, would no longer survive in the future. And part of me agreed with that, but there was some of us fighting a slight rearguard action and saying that most big organisations are actually very remote from the customer. The people working in those organisations are parts of long chains before it even gets near the customer. And it's those long chains that I think are coming under pressure from the inside. And it was interesting listening to the presentation about Nokia, because when we chatted earlier, we sort of acknowledged the fact that the bit of Nokia that I thought was going to be talked about wasn't the bit you were talking about. There are lots of different bits of Nokia that are being social and doing social, and they find it really hard to know what each other's doing. And I think what I find interesting about this, and going back to Will's introduction, is that I believe we're coming to the end of the industrial period of organising how we work. And I think this is true even how these tools become adopted within the organisation. You know, some Loic Lemur once called me an intrapreneur. So in other words, I was working entrepreneurially inside an organisation. And there's something about that viral, passionate, engaged willingness to talk to people that is what drives these tools, that is currently the antithesis of business-like. You know, our corporate mentalities are trained from school to be orderly, tidy, neatly lined up behind a corporate hierarchy and behind the message. And I think more and more of us are pushing up against that. And you know, people mutter about corporate springs, and I think we're probably a way off from that. But I do think as more and more people get made redundant from that large corporate world, they're setting up small startups. And I think more, you know, statistically in America, more and more of the workforce is employed by small to medium-sized enterprises. So what I find exciting about this is that we can get more humanness back into the world of work, because we have dehumanized it, we've sanitized it, we've professionalized it to an absurd degree. We've professionalized communication so that people have forgotten how to talk. You know, most managers have forgotten how to talk normally to staff. And I can remember this feeling. You know, I was a line manager at the BBC. My first real job was being responsible for 50 people. That very phrase is nonsensical. How could I be responsible for grown-ups, some of whom were old enough to be my dad, who'd started working at the BBC before I was even born? And I struggled with that sense of responsibility and started wearing a tie and talking funny. And then I realized I was the top of a slippery slope, that most of the managerial group in organizations never claw their way back up, and they descend into management bollocks and get lost in it. And then they have professional communicators, comms people who do the communications for them. And then some CEOs, poor buggers, get given a blog by the comms department and told to blog. And it's a bit like watching your dad trying to dance at a disco. You're proud of him for having a go, but you'd really rather he stopped. Whereas I think, and again, I mean, my big thing about all these tools is that they're available to everybody. They're available to the bottom, the middle, and the top of organizations if they truly engage with them. And I think that requires things that we've forgotten about, things like playfulness. You know, some of the stuff, I love Adrian's presentation because it's talking about the peripheral stuff, the silly stuff, the non-business focused stuff. That's how you draw people into these spaces. I watch lots of people spending loads of money on platforms and technology and still having this corporate lid on people being themselves. And then they wonder why people squirt out onto the internet and Facebook and other places, because that's where the good conversations are taking place. But for those who are willing to roll up their sleeves and get involved in this, and let's face it, what we're talking about is nothing more complicated than a text screen, a text square on a screen, and you press save and it goes somewhere. All the tools do the same thing. And they all allow you to hyperlink to other things. So they're all about collectively saying something and pointing to what somebody else said. So my ultimate fantasy is an organization where everybody blogs. And I mean blogging, proper old school blogging with more than 140 characters. We have to think about what you're saying. Because I think the potential for everybody to be thoughtful about what they're doing in a business context. Why am I doing this? Why doesn't this work? Why is this painful? Why is this an opportunity? And then writing well about that. And I think there's a potential for a new business literacy. You know, most business is actually illiterate in the sense that it writes sanitized documentation to a formula that's pretty much unreadable. And so many of people in work life are busy in meetings that don't agree things or writing 40-page reports that nobody ever reads and are disparaging of Twitter. A 140-character tweet can change the world. But in order to write that, you have to be thoughtful. You have to think about, why am I saying this? What's the intended consequence of me saying this? And I believe strongly that if we, you know, that's the change in business that I hope we're going to see. We're going to shrug off the industrial, commercial, corporate thing and become more engaged as individuals and more thoughtful as individuals in what we do. Thank you.
Come on. Right, so has anyone got a question yet? Yes, Simon, do we have kind of helpful people?
Hi, I'm Simon. I'm from a company called Claremont. I just wonder, is social business going to end up getting co-opted by business as usual?
Sorry, I'm leaping in there.
Yeah, go for it. Let's just go.
I think assimilation is the biggest risk. This is partly why I worry about the whole social business, social media thing, because I think it's partly assimilation. It's just turning it into same old, and taking some of the tension out of it. So yes, I would agree. It's a real risk.
Personally, I think assimilation is the biggest opportunity, because the sooner we get this stuff in the bloodstream, then the better. Like, I think the organisations we work with do big stuff. And we need big organisations to make the planes land and to build the roads and I think I'm completely opposed. I think absolutely the sooner this becomes assimilated, we can move on to the next big job, and this job will be done and there'll be another one. Okay, let's see what the other panelists say and we'll come back.
Okay. It's kind of happening with social media, isn't it? It started off being a thing. And I can't wait for there to stop being a thing of social media. It's just what we do. It's how we do things. And it's kind of, I think, the reason why, you know, I referred to it earlier, Web 2.0, no one uses it anymore because that's just how we do things. And if social business as a term is a way of getting those behaviours into businesses, brilliant.
Yeah, I have to agree there. I feel very much the same. It's all the you know, the buzzwords, the tags. It's the 2.0. It's the social business. End of the day, we're all adapting to these changes all the time, and we just, you know, you have to do what you have to do. If the technology changes, you move with it. You can put whatever label you want on it. I think you just have to, you know, do whatever's necessary to move along with the times.
Quick poll. Put your hand up if you think the term social business is useful. Okay, it's about 50-50 then. So the other 50% of you think it's a load of old bollocks and it's just a buzzword? Yeah? No? No. Okay. So Simon's saying we don't think we know what it means yet, so it's just...
What's the Wikipedia definition?
Well, one challenge we've got is that there's a Nobel Prize winner using social business to describe something completely different. So Mohammed Yunus, who founded the Grameen Bank, Grameen Phone, doing incredible work with microfinance and in Bangladesh generally, calls a social business a business, an organisation that operates like a business but doesn't distribute profits. So I already feel conflicted about this because we call ourselves a social business consultancy, but he is the man and he's doing really important work. So I think terminology is clumsy and difficult. But Simon, quick perspective before we move on to the next question.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the most important thing to remember is that ultimately it's about people, right? I mean, it's about engaging, in our context, our employees, and as I said at the beginning, there are some people that will just never kind of quite get it, and you can't kind of force them to be social. But there are a lot of others that you equip them with the right tools and training, and they really engage in it, adopt it, and it's just a great way of particularly people who are very remote from the rest of the organisation. It's just a great way of them becoming up front and centre with their thoughts and thinking.
I really like your point about how the smaller offices and the smaller places that are more active in kind of trying to get into that centre of gravity and have a relationship. Next question. Come on. Yeah, we'll go for a woman.
Hi, my name is Mar and I work for a digital agency called BML, and they often consult companies like you do, and I think that the main challenge what we see is that I think it relates back to the question you were saying, they often, the social is considered Twitter, opening Twitter handle or setting up Facebook page or stuff like that, so the senior management really doesn't buy into that. So I just wanted to get your perspective of how you actually, what are the challenges that you see and how you overcome in your organizations?
Yeah, I'll take that to start with. So I say this all the time internally. It's like, becoming a more socially organised business isn't about just having a Twitter account and a Facebook account and tweeting and knowing what they are. It's doing social things. It's walking by our Agora screens and then sharing that information with someone else who doesn't know about it. It's doing the basic social things. It's that back to real sort of meeting people face to face, having that coffee or that conversation with someone which is giving them insights, it's giving them information which they wouldn't have normally got through a report sitting in an email or on a server somewhere. So that's, it's really educating them, not about social tools necessarily, it's about being sociable.
So it's more about behaviour, you're saying. Okay.
As a charity, there's sort of almost more of an impetus to be more kind of open, because we're obviously operating through the donations and the financial support and the social support from our supporters. And they're not necessarily just financial supporters. And I think one of the big shifts that's really key with social business is just tearing down those walls around the organisation and becoming a little more permeable. Letting people in a bit more. When we've got decisions to be made, are we always the best people to be sort of taking the final decision, or should we work with our spheres around us? So yeah, I'm sort of a big fan of Beth Cantor's work in her book Connected Nonprofit. She talks about the difference between the charities the fort and the charities the bazaar, with very permeable walls.
So just to prod that a little bit for the sake of the audience, because it's easy to say things like that, how real is that? Or how do I feel as an individual in an organisation when someone says, let's just be a little bit more permeable? And I'm like, get out of my terrain. This is my territory. I've crafted this domain over years. Like, realistically, what resistance have you come up against in the kind of, let's be more porous and permeable?
Firstly, I would never say it like that.
How would you say it? Because I think, how we frame these things might be useful to discuss.
Actually, no, to be fair, there are a couple of people I have said that to. So, for instance, when we're talking about sort of an editorial board meeting, should we be opening that up to someone in one of our broader circles on a, visiting basis? I haven't quite got that one through yet, so, watch this space.
Okay.
Otherwise, we have people that work on our events fundraising, and they do a lot of work looking at our volunteers that are, saying, I'm going to give my time, I'm going to do this crazy thing to raise money for you. Maybe there's a space there, opening that out, and they're our tribe. How do we integrate with our tribe?
Okay,
we talk to them already. So
related, Simon, you were talking about, and I really like this point because I think someone needed to say it, which is not everyone wants to be social, but how, if we've got 9,000 people or 12 people in a team, and a percentage of them are entrenched and then resisting, what then?
So I think that part of it goes to kind of measurement and sort of showing the impact of the kind of the social activity, and so, too often it's kind of overlooked. What's the point of me doing this? And everyone's kind of keen to kind of publish more Facebook pages, and they kind of shout about how many more likes they've got or followers they've got, and I think that increasingly what we're seeing both kind of internally but also with our clients is that now the kind of the heads of marketing or the CEOs and the people who sign off the checks to invest in social media are saying how's this impacting my business? So there's been, I think that we can show now we can show internally the impact that our social media activity is having on our particularly on the B2C side. Our Adobe.com is a $500 million e-commerce business, and we can kind of show the impact of, for example, around product launches and all the kind of impact. Let's say you're measuring the Twitter channel, the impact of Twitter has on driving traffic to the site and driving purchases. So I think you need to demonstrate the impact of your social media activity, and that's probably likely to get more people more involved.
Okay, so Ewan, we're talking about resistance, we're talking about measurement, we're talking about needs.
Yep.
What's your perspective?
And I'm going to come back at the assimilation thing, because I think adoption is wonderful. Assimilation is a different thing. Assimilation is just carrying on doing the things you've always done while tinkering with social media, which is what a lot of us we're seeing at the moment. And it's funny that I'm going to use the example of the Nokia chief exec, because I think actually he's been really good at genuinely taking this on board, and gets really up to his elbows in this stuff on their bulletin boards and blogging very well, responding to stuff. And I mentioned this on Twitter, and Dennis Howlett, in his usual grumpy style, came back and said, yeah, that's all very well, but the share price is in the toilet. And I think it's going to be really interesting for the next few years, because those who are brave have got a chance to reinvent their businesses. Those who are cautious, I think, will begin to struggle. And I think making that case to chief execs who don't get it is really hard. They didn't get where they are today by believing in this rubbish. But I think more and more of them, my experience is that more C-level people are beginning to realise that there's something up that they need to take cognizance of.
Yeah, absolutely agree there, Ewan. It's part of our task was to educate that senior level leadership, and the very easy way to do it is just put it out there. We didn't shove it in their face, but there was one lunchtime I was in Helsinki, and Stephen Elop, our chairman CEO, just happened to be sitting by the screens. After he'd finished his lunch, went up and stood there, and before you knew it, his entire leadership team was standing around him, all around him, pointing at screens, talking about things, saying, hey, what's this? We didn't know it was happening. And before I knew it, I had an email from my CMO saying, I need to know more about this. So that was a simple fix.
I love that example. I love also the illustration of where the CEO goes, the lieutenants suddenly arrive. But really good. I love that kind of let's put something physically in the world and then get a reaction. Next question, please. We want you to. So we'll do Chris, and then we'll come over to you two guys over there.
Hi there, I'm Chris Reed. I just wanted to ask a question about culture, actually, and organisational culture, because fairly into social businesses, and I think you're all very lucky sitting on the panel representing businesses that have got a very strong culture. Adobe made a point of it, and actually where there is this shared belief that runs from the top to the bottom of the organisation. How much harder is it for an organisation that perhaps doesn't have that shared culture? And do you think that's the place to start or the place to finish? Will the social tools help develop the culture, or should you develop the culture and then use the social tools?
Culture is one of those words a bit like community that make me wince slightly, because people talk about managing communities and forming communities or managing cultures or changing cultures. People change culture by acting differently, and how you get them to act differently is very subtle. And I can remember being subjected to various comms initiatives in the BBC about culture change. I remember once watching a big video coverage of a big conference, and it was like zooming in on happy, clappy staff talking to each other. And watching the broadcast industry turn in on itself was like watching a dog chewing off its own leg in a trap. And I think that that's partly what I'm talking about. If we try to manifest this stuff by having a culture change initiative, then we've kind of lost the plot. if we allow something to grow from baby steps. And a lot of it's not about making something happen, it's about getting out of the way of something that's trying to happen.
Okay, it's very interesting. As Aid and then Simon.
How do you change culture? You change behaviours. So one of the things I didn't fit in my talk earlier was that, I talked a lot about tools. Obviously, it's not about tools, but you've got to have the right tools in place. And, maybe I gave the impression that we have a glorious, harmonious culture, but we don't. Culture is different team by team, division by division. There's an overall vibe to the organisation, but I wouldn't say it's all one, harmonious culture. So you've got to work on the behaviours and the sharing. It's like that old saying, the future's already here, it's just unevenly distributed. There are some nuggets of culture within the organisation that are really sharing and really strong and really social. And there are some that are going to take years to get there, if ever. And it's about how you increase one and let the other one sort itself out and follow eventually. That probably sounds a bit stark, but I think that's the only way.
So Simon, something about the nitty-gritty of culture, not like we've got these great values, but what is it like on the ground?
Yeah. So I consider myself very lucky in the sense that I've always been someone who's kind of understood and just enjoyed engaging in social media before I joined Adobe. And but I could see I joined Adobe 6 months ago. The minute I arrived, it was immediately. I think generally employees are kind of fairly kind of cautious or kind of concerned about what they can or can't do, and much of it comes down to common sense. But one thing that Adobe does, I mentioned it, very early on in the first few few weeks of joining, is that you have to go through a kind of social media kind of training session. So you're immediately encouraged, to engage in social, and that kind of just helps to employees relax, and they can start to see it. We make it very upfront in terms of the videos that employees do, the kind of the blogs, the inside Adobe, the tools. So it just becomes it just naturally becomes part of people's behaviour. And as I said, there will still always be people that just don't get it, and you can't fight that. But for those who do, or kind of are on the edge, just make it just really encourage them right from the minute they join the company. I think any company can do that, no matter what size.
Okay, just to wrap up on that, I guess the bigger the company is, the harder it is to try and affect a change. There are essentially micro cultures within the company. There are very social teams like ourselves and marketing departments, but then if you go out to like R&D and care, it's just not the same. They have a very different culture. It's just the way it is. So trying to force things upon them is very difficult. It's for us, our challenge is to try and give people reasons to why it's going to make their work or life better. How's it going to make them happier in what they do? So we don't want to push things down their throat. We don't force the tool upon them. We simply say, this is available, maybe it's something that can make your life easier.
Well, just a word on that. Just have to say, regarding care and R&D, we found there are a number of individuals in those groups that are just equip them with the tools, give them the kind of enable them to engage, and they love it. They love it, and they've built the relationships with some of the most powerful influencers in our community.
Mm. Cool. There were some people over there. Yep, sir. Say who you are and what your question is.
Hi, my name is Viresh. I'm from Pinterest, and we work around this social business space. So the question is to the Nokia chap. So you're doing all this listening. Actually, it's for you, but then you can open it up as well. So you're doing a lot of listening and a lot of listening. So you're staring at these walls and taking it all in and then sharing this data. But do you find that there's just so much data there that's been presented to you such that one moment you can see something and think, yes, let's take it on board. And the next moment you look at the wall, oh, everybody's happy. And then so you go back to maybe changing your whatever project you're working on, whatever. So is it just too much data?
So at the moment we try and focus it, because obviously there's a lot of conversations going out there about various different things. It can be from just someone tweeting from a phone, just saying I've broken my phone or something, or it can be someone who has a serious issue. It's like, how do I fix a bug or something? So we do try and sort of narrow it down. We narrow that sort of
gap in the sense of we'll focus our attention of listening purely at the moment, for example, on marketing campaigns. What's the effect? What's the impact on a certain product launch or something? So in that respect, we just have to, we can't, as we say, I think the Finnish saying goes, you can't boil the ocean. You have to sort of do one step at a time and take every piece as it comes.
Cool. Next question. Yep, the back there, middle back. We have some more ladies' questions as well.
Hi, I'm David. And
sometimes
I work in
men
public
are.
relations. Sorry.
I was just going to say the men.
I was just really interested to get your perspective on what happens when things go wrong and employees go off message, and to get a sense of how supportive your management has been and how forgiving they are.
Who wants to go for that one? Over here, you guys.
Yeah, I can take that one to a certain degree. So we definitely have a kind of crisis management kind of strategy in place and process in place. We also have a a mailing list that everybody's kind of automatically signed up to around social, kind of how to address social media kind of crises. And I don't know the exact kind of answer on a kind of individual basis. So I'd have to kind of get back to you on the Adobe policy is. Thankfully, I haven't been involved in that, but from a kind of general kind of crisis management perspective, we've got just clear processes in place as to how to handle a crisis.
Yeah, I mean, we have clear processes on how we deal with stuff from the outside world. We've got guidelines that we borrowed and were inspired by Intel, really good. I urge you to check them out. But to look at it from another perspective, we haven't had any issues of that yet. And I kind of wish we'd got to the stage where there was enough activity that we had pushed those boundaries a little bit more. Because I think actually that's a bit of an indicator of success. When you've got people that feel they can be that vocal, then you push the boundaries and it gets interesting. At the moment, we're maybe a little bit too corporate.
Just from my own personal, I'm glad we got onto this, the control thing. I mean, I think the thing for me is, did we ever have control? So a lot of our organisations have frontline staff, call centres, people in shops, people chugging on the street, or not that you do that, but on your behalf. The point is, I think it's really weird and interesting how we're suddenly concerned about that kind of control there, and did we ever even have it? I think, and for me, it relates to something about fear of failure. And I think one of my personal kind of random grenade is that in business, it's not acceptable to fail. And I think that's going to change in the 21st century. It will be more acceptable to fail. And as it becomes more acceptable to fail, then that kind of control, fear, trust paradigm starts to change, I think.
And just picking up on that, I mean, I think you're dead right. The control was a figment of imagination in the first place, but what we've got now is a chance for influence. And it's what you do when the shit hits the fan that matters, not the fact that it has. And just going to use the example of Tom Watson a week or so ago when his intern got hold of his Twitter account and tweeted something inappropriate, which, well, the first thing to say was it was picked up on by the media, who have an interest in blowing nothing into something. And then Tom did a really good blog post where he basically just said, grow up, get a grip, it was a mistake, no, I'm not going to sack her. And a whole bunch of us pointed to Tom's blog post, basically reinforcing his message of get over it. So I think if you've got a network of people who trust you and think you've got integrity, then they will look after you when the shit hits the fan. If you don't, then you're in trouble anyway.
Okay, next question. Yay!
Hi, I'm Jackie Taylor, CEO of Flying Binary. We deploy technology, beyond Web 2 stuff, in order to do game changing in companies. Drive that from data usually, both internal and external. And one of the things that we tend to find is in putting the social and the company perspectives in one pot, looking for insights, finding the needle in the haystack, the thing that yesterday's job was, £45 million hole in your invoicing system. How does that happen? What will we do? Now, that wasn't a social piece, but when we do what we do, this transformation happens. So the fact that you've got this this social vibe going on, but it's not connected across the organisation. What we've found with projects is that one project gets visibility, and then there's like poking holes in Swiss cheese. It joins up eventually, but it sparks a revolution across the company. Nobody's really talked about that. I just wondered whether that was going on.
I guess to a certain extent, and you're right, the way we're rolling out our projects, Agora Socializer, is we're doing it market at a time. We have to start somewhere, we can't do everything. So, and we do find that, yes, people from, so for example, we took the Agora product over to a marketing summit event, and basically every single market unit manager had come to this one place, they saw our platform, and before you know it, everyone's requesting, where do we get it from? So very simply, it's, you have to start small, you have to start somewhere, and then before you know it, if it's good, if it's going to affect their change, if it's going to make their life easier, then chances are it will be taken on.
Our approach, if I'm answering the question correctly, is that we kind of, I showed the kind of social media centre of excellence, or the hub. So we've really got a hub and spoke model. So we've got this centre of excellence team, and then they've kind of identified key individuals across multiple departments in different regions, and they've kind of gone out and kind of worked with those individuals on the kind of education and training and kind of guidelines perspective, and that's the way that we've kind of rolled out our social media kind of strategy.
Cool. Any other questions, or I can prompt some stuff? Yep.
Right down the front. So it's a question about the cultural thing. I think we're all quite excited about social business, and the thought of an anti-social business is certainly not appealing. But given that businesses are essentially a legal construct that exists in a regulatory framework, and sometimes that's quite tightly regulated, so pharma, finance has very serious constraints on what they can do. But even for a company that's NASDAQ listed, if you disclose information about somebody who could become a potential customer, right there is a multi-million-dollar fine for that employee. Given that people are getting smarter about mining social information, what's the backlash to that going to be? Can companies really be open, or if, as people get smarter and smarter about doing things like mining employees, Foursquare check-ins, who are they spending time with, which businesses, how are those businesses performing, mining LinkedIn data, is there a potential that this whole thing could turn around?
Who fancies that one?
Okay.
We'll go for Annabelle, you and Aid.
Okay, so part of our sort of ongoing philosophy is to be open and honest about everything we do. I still believe we're one of the most trusted brands in the world, and what our social program, at least, is that we work directly with the people who are already our massive advocates. We have what we call an advocacy program, and we have an advocacy program management tool. So we're actually quite a few steps down the way in terms of how we work with these guys. These are people who have already had their own blogs about Nokia, and just, they were tech geeks. They just like talking about phones. And we just have a very open relationship with them. We send them a device, let them trial it out for a few weeks. Just give us your feedback. If you think it's crap, say it. If you think it's amazing, say it. So we have this ongoing relationship with literally hundreds of Nokia advocates around the world, different markets, and we feel that they're kind of doing that social, spreading the word, that word of mouth marketing for us.
There's no doubt that there's a dark side to all of this. I get worried sometimes it comes across as utopian. I think the regulatory piece is going to be really difficult for quite a long time to come. I think the bottom line was put very well by Dave Weiner, who invented RSS, who said, if you don't want me to slag off your product, don't have a shit product. And I think in the long run, that's the uncomfortable bottom line people are kind of squirming about. I think the other aspect of it is your staff. If you've truly engaged your staff in your business, where they understand the context and they understand the openness they can afford to make in the work that they're doing, you become much safer. Trying to stop it altogether, I think, is very dangerous.
I think there's an education and a sort of media literacy point that hopefully will come up through secondary and university education. Just that awareness of what the privacy implications are. If you are tweeting and if you've got your real name associated with it, you're saying it to anybody that cares. Same with Foursquare check-in, same with LinkedIn. This is public. There's a member of my family who, I don't want to go into too much detail because it could get weird, who probably didn't realise that when she tweeted something, a lot of other people could see it, and she was doing work experience. And anyway, And yeah, she's 16, 17 years old, lives in Facebook, digital native, but hadn't quite twigged that the person that she was doing work experience for might Google her. And it was like third or fourth hit, her Twitter account. It's like, okay, I didn't have the heart to go, they saw that.
Okay, let's move on.
Just, a couple of points to that. I think, previous company I worked for, which was a much smaller business, again, NASDAQ company, their kind of approach from a social media guidelines perspective was to focus on what you can't do as opposed to what you can do. And it got to the point where the kind of the what you can't do guidelines was so scary, it just put, everyone's like, right, I'm just staying away from this, it's not worth my job. I think we're seeing more companies move, and I think this is the right approach, to move to to focus on what you can do, and leave the rest to common sense. Because I think that ultimately, you should have smart employees, and a lot of it is down to common sense as to what you can and can't do. There's still a lot of education and training. An example would be, from a sales guy who just come back from a visit to a prospective customer. This was selling large enterprise software. And he put on his LinkedIn profile, just come back from X, Y, and Z customer. And I said to him, you do realise that all the guys that connect with you can see that, which include companies from competitive companies. You're happy to expose that information that you're trying to sell to this company. So education is important, and the guidelines.
I got a couple of responses. One of the most interesting things that happens, I think, is how the lag between what goes on in the real world and then the law. And we're going to experience that lag, as we have forever, because the law can only make sense of what has settled down. It can't make sense of what's emerging. We work with banks, and it's interesting. So firstly that. Secondly, there's a lot of very credible academic research into how young people are growing up and their notions of privacy. Their notions of privacy are completely different to yours and mine. They actually grow up with the failure thing that I was talking about. They grow up thinking, I will make mistakes, they will be massively shared, and I will move on. And that will be photos of me with my head down a toilet. It will be videos of me doing whatever inappropriate thing. So I don't know that we can trust that those younger people are going to come into the workforce. It may be the opposite. And thirdly, I think for all of those reasons, it relates back to the ability to fail. We are going to fail, and these things are going to be in the public domain. And it's not a question of when, if, it's a question of when. So.
As a little follow-up on my point, continuing the anecdote, my relative who was on work experience tweeting about the fact she was bored on work experience, my initial response to it was, that's a really stupid thing to do. But then looking at it again, maybe if the people who she was doing it with did Google her and saw that she was bored, maybe she shouldn't be bored.
Will, can I, jump in? Sorry, I know I'm jumping in on the panel. Just wanted to reference a couple of other sessions that have happened during the week that talk directly to the points that all of you have just made. So I would suggest that people look at the live streams, the recorded live streams from Teenage of the Species and Family Circles, both of which touched on media literacy in children and in teenagers, and look at how they're doing. The Ofcom studies on media literacy amongst children under 13 is fascinating. So 15%, I think, of kids under 13 were on Facebook. And the other one was the freedom of tweet, where we had Mark Stevens talking about law. I can't remember the exact quote, but it was something like, judges are completely ill-placed to make any laws around Twitter. But it's worth watching those just to get a sense, more depth on those.
Cool. Another question from you guys. Yep.
Given the SOPA and the PEPA furore that we've had recently, and we're just wondering people's views on this, because for my part, I believe that our offline laws just do not apply to the web. We have to move on our entire legal system, and certainly the crowd response to SOPA and PEPA would suggest that too. Just wondered what everybody else thought.
Yeah, okay, this is me with just my personal hat on, not Nokia hat on.
That is media literacy.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult because you want to share everything, you want things to get out there, and we know that information sharing is key to progression. But obviously, there's a point where you do want some sort of control. There's ridiculous legal issues that can arise out of nothing. Once you get the lawyers involved. So I'm all for it personally. Just get it out there, get it open. but I just I don't know, have a good lawyer basically.
It's a difficult question to answer directly, but I would say that if you do feel strongly about it, don't just turn your website black. Go and talk to your MP about it. That is your influence on power.
It's interesting, though, that at the moment, I mean, something that hasn't come up in the conversations is timescales. And somebody asked me recently how long I thought it would take for the full consequences of the web to be seen, and I said 50 years, and they looked surprised at this. But I could imagine that we're really at the very, very early stages of this stuff. And in the future, you could imagine global internet councils or something that doesn't, because at the moment the laws are really screwed by the fact that servers in one country are affecting people in another country, and it's a real mess at the moment. And it's almost like the citizens of the internet, to quote John Perry Barlow, need to get themselves organised in a way that we make the best of this opportunity and don't consign it to lawmakers who really haven't a clue.
Okay, let's have some more questions. Practical questions? Yes, sir.
Hi, Richard Delavan is my name. Ade, you had a point before about how the encouragement of employees inside the organization using social tools would eventually result in them becoming more adept at externally engaging with these tools. Is there not a danger that what was once forbidden becomes mandatory, and that there's the pushback from employees that now my job is marketing as well as everything else I have to do? So how do you cope with that inevitable backlash? And that'd be for the panel.
Wow, that's a really good question. It's funny because it's exactly the same as a conversation I had the day before yesterday, as we were talking about how we encourage... Is my mic just gone? Can you hear me? Hello? No, it's gone? No. Okay. Just talk. Hopefully that one's better. So we have... there are TV programs which are really apt for what we talk about. So there was Frozen Planet before Christmas. There's been a couple of documentaries on in the last couple of months about renewable energy and green taxes, things like that. So we have quite a well-engaged set of campaign staff who all tweet. Some in personal capacity, some in less personal capacities, but they all get really involved. And it's a real strength. Someone said, "Oh, on that program, you guys really owned the hashtag," and it was like, "Yeah, sweet, that's really cool." But then you think, well, if we're then treating that as a strategy, as that's a sort of mandated thing, as you say, is it then falling into that? Well, these guys should be getting time off in lieu for the time they're watching it. Everyone enjoys it at the moment, so there's no risk of pushback in the imminent future. But I think it comes back to that real sort of base level. What's the contract of employment? What are you covering off on that? Because people they'll be everyone in the organisation will be a spokesperson. They'll also be a customer service agent. So I don't have the answers today. Come back in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and likewise, every employee is ultimately, may not be very good, but is ultimately, a salesman. They have a phone. They're trying to usually advocate the product. So if you give everyone the sort of power at least, or the acceptance that it's okay to talk about it, then it's a step towards making things just more amenable. How can you manage that on a global scale? It's very tough. So to just have it as open, but obviously it's a common sense thing. I think that's what it boils down to for me.
I think that for any I think a goal of, this is my view, but a goal of a successful company is to have as many evangelists as possible in the organisation, irrespective of what department they're from, and if you can actively encourage them to do so, you'll still find those who are resistant, but generally you will find a few kind of individuals that typically wouldn't have thought of themselves as kind of on the front facing for the company, but you give them the ability to become so, and they absolutely love it. So it's I think for me everyone's an evangelist, and that's what you should be striving to get to anyway.
What do you think?
I once worked for a company that said if everyone isn't blogging, that they should look for another job, and I think that's taking it a bit too far. And I think there's a danger that we who may have started on the marketing side see this as a massive opportunity. We've got thousands of people in the organization who could all be tweeting. It'd be fantastic, and it works for a couple of weeks while people are enthusiastic. But after that, they realize they're not getting paid anymore for it, and they wonder why.
But isn't that partly the coming to the end of this kind of industrial engagement with your company as well? It's not my job. Yeah.
We've got a question middle back there. Thank you.
Hi, thanks. My name is Chris from Nokia, and Simon, talking about the goals, and like you said, would be a goal to have as many advocates as possible. Now that's external facing. I would be keen staying internally inside the firewall. How would you guys define success of your activities? And have you already identified KPIs to determine that? And how do you measure them?
Good question.
That is a wicked question.
So I guess I'll share my limited knowledge because I'm not kind of directly in that team that do have the social media kind of hub that do have goals. In terms of how they're measuring kind of success, they're using our own products and kind of drinking our own champagne, I guess. So in terms of engagement of employees, pages viewed, groups being set up, kind of the comments, discussions, those kind of basic kind of metrics internally. I guess that's kind of about as far as the level of detail I've got. I can find out more information about specific goals.
Okay, let's do Aid and then Ewan. Anaban's not allowed to answer because he's from Nokia.
You can tell the difference between corporates and charities. You get champagne, we get Kool-Aid. Yeah, much the same answer. We have kind of proxy indicators. Whether they're the right indicators, I don't think they are at the moment. I think the numerical KPIs around what proportion of the organisation are using the more sophisticated functionality offered by our social intranet. So leaving a comment, editing a page, that kind of stuff. They're really useful to know, and we have KPIs that we're judged against on that. But I kind of think that there's a lot of subjectivity that's really helpful. So I showed some examples up there of where people had told stories or used the richer tools to be a little bit more interesting and engaging, which I think are fantastic, and they're really rich when you're talking to management with that sort of anecdotal hat on. Does that pay into the the return on investment of the platform and the mission of the organisation? Not directly. But does it make us a happier organisation that have more conversations about the things that matter? Does that mean that we're more open? Does that mean that people are more engaged with us? Yeah, it's really hard to tell. This is the beginnings of a kind of a messy analysis.
So if there was ever a question that was teed up for you, Ewan, how do you measure collaboration internally?
Well, I think part of the trick is getting what you're doing big enough and useful enough to enough people before people start asking that question, actually. But also, genuinely, the way I used to do it at the Beeb was I would do a search for the phrase "thank you." Once a week, I'd do a search for that phrase. I would see where somebody had thanked somebody else for something on the network, and then I'd get a good nose for what was a big thing, small thing, significant, or whatever. And then I'd go and ask them, "Could you put a rough figure on how much that opportunity gained you or avoided costs?" And I just kept a pack of stories, like it says, which I was never actually called on to use, but it just gave a scale of what the benefit was.
Yeah, unlike Ewan's idea, I'm going to plug that right in as soon as I get back to the office. I will. That sounds, absolutely. That appreciation, it's a great way of thinking about it. I really like that. Cool.
Good. I'm glad we got that question as well because it's been hanging around. It's on the list, but I wanted to see if anyone was going to ask. More? Can anyone smell meatballs or something like that? It's like, oh my gosh. I need to. You can smell meatballs, Sam.
No, I've got a question.
Oh, okay, cool.
Hello. I'm sorry about that. This new aftershave is really odd. So I've got two things. Firstly, is I've been pondering the whole definition of social business, and you mentioned Mohammed Yunus's thing. So here's my take, having heard lots of government stuff recently, that a business like he's describing is actually a social enterprise, and social business is exactly the right term for this because it's the social bit inside a business, and taking Ewan's point about not being based on essentially military architecture anymore, the business is about the people. We're sort of slowly edging towards that. And my question, which probably I'm guessing that Simon and Aniban may want to opt out of answering is, so it seems like organisations have a difficult time and then turn to social inside the enterprise. I'm thinking of Adobe and Nokia have been through periods of significant change in that place. Dell, you could pop in there as well. I'm thinking about Apple, who are not having a rough time at the moment, to put it mildly, and just wondering, from the panel's perspective, we talked about how it's difficult to sell into senior management in an organisation, and there's lots like them that are incredibly secretive. How the hell do you sell that in? And are they going to need to bother, or are they going to have to hit a crisis before they actually need to embrace some of these principles?
Another awesome question.
It's interesting how Apple always comes up. And, and actually, having just finished listening to the audiobook of his biography, I mean, it was interesting how, you know, for such a totalitarian thug,
God rest his soul.
What he was good at was generating quite a robust internal culture. It was quite fluid. Things could be reshaped quite readily, and there seems to have been quite a high level of discussion and engagement amongst the people who worked in Apple. So I don't think it's not a social company. I mean, given their circumstances, I'm not surprised they're covert. Talking to Richard Sambrook, actually, both of us felt the BBC hadn't had a big enough crisis. I don't think they'd had a big enough scare to really take this stuff on board. So I tend to agree, Sam. I think complacency is the biggest risk, and those who've had a fright will get the finger out quicker.
Anyone else want to have a go at that one? I mean, my perspective is just that is the same as yours, Sam, which is that the companies who are furthest on have had some of the biggest scares, and that is a really helpful impetus. That's my perspective. Yeah. What was the impact of the burning platform memo?
Here we go. The impact was deep breath, everyone, because everything was going to change. And with change comes resistance. So it wasn't, didn't go down well with the Symbian team, for example. So there's always going to be change, but with anything, especially in technology, you have to adapt to change. And be it, taking on new operating systems, be it, changing staff or whatever, if the business is to survive, you have to adapt to change. It's as simple as that. And I think from our perspective, it's, we started making boots and paper. So we've come a long way in terms of, technology, cabling. Again, this is the next era. We're adapting to that next stage. And that's why actually our R&D department's hugely important, because they're the ones who come up with the next big thing. So yeah, it's just adapting to change, and you have to do it, otherwise you sort of shrivel up and die.
Okay, we're nearing the end. What we don't want is this to have been not useful for you. So if you came to learn something, good Simon, anyone else as well, if you came to learn something or talk about something or hear about something and it hasn't been spoken, this is your last chance, last few questions. Please hold us to account. So we'll go to you and then to Simon.
Hi, I'm Gary Richardson from KPMG. So we're a big organisation. And so rather than look at the technology, has your organisations considered social workspaces? So how the good old chicken coops of desks are now being rearranged, and the sort of flow through a building, and this random social interaction that sparks, conversation and actually leads to innovation, potential opportunities, new products, service and offerings. So what's your experience be? Move away from the technology and look at the real social interactions between people.
That's great, thank you. Guys,
yeah.
Simon and Renee.
So firstly, I invite you down to our new Maidenhead office, which opened about 3-4 months ago. But everybody, you're all welcome to come. Just tweet me first to make sure I'm there. So it's a great place to come. Basically, the Maidenhead office was kind of modelled around the recent kind of revamp of our headquarters, which was very much built with kind of collaboration in mind. So you'll see a lot of kind of spaces which are designed to kind of allow people to kind of get away from, encourage people to get away from their kind of typical desks, office environment, and just kind of grab a coffee, stand up in a nice environment, and just chat and innovate in that kind of format. Kind of lots of kind of interactive whiteboards, so they don't have to be just stuck to their desk to kind of connect to the network. So absolutely, that's our approach. And as I said, you're welcome to come down and have a look at it.
Party in Maidenhead, you sound about it.
It's a really interesting question for us. WWF UK is organised into 4 divisions, and those divisions aren't just organisational, they are physical. We have a 2-storey building with 2 halves. It's kind of an 8 shape, and each division sits in 1 quarter. So that causes so much social division within the organisation. You get a real kind of upstairs, downstairs, them and us kind of feel. So I feel like a lot of the stuff that I'm concentrating on for an internal space is almost combating that physical space. We're lucky enough that we are moving into a new building next year that we're building from scratch in Woking. Yes. So a lot of the design of the inside of that building has been as a result of kind of an analysis of how we work as an organisation. That happened a couple of years ago, so it's kind of really in flux, and I think we're going to have some catching up to do. But I'm one of the people looking at how we structure the places inside the building to make sure that we capture those social interactions and encourage that serendipitous water cooler moments. You know, as I was saying earlier, it's not just digital. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think everyone's getting a new office. We're getting one in Paddington. We're moving in there in a few months, they're taking our feedback quite seriously. We've been invited to go down and have a look. At the moment, it's just an empty shell. But the HR guys and the people who are doing all the planning behind that are taking all our feedbacks, asking us what we want, how we want to, share our spaces. Currently, in current offices, for example, no one, as far as I know, is meant to have a fixed desk. They're all hot desks. You can just go and sit in pretty much any office. I can go to the Berlin office and just sit there for a day and work from that office if I need to. So we're kind of open in that sense. In terms of the social spaces, it's very much what Agora is there to do. It's in one of our busiest canteens in the HQ. So I think we're doing it. We're taking steps, but we haven't gone like the whole hog to build a ball pit or something.
Okay, and then last question from Simon before we wrap up, I think.
Thanks. We do a lot of work with government on social media, and a lot of the chat today has been about corporations and things like this. Government has massive firewall, obviously, taking the title of today's talk. And the thing that we come across is it's not acceptable to fail, to pick up your point, Will. And there's massive Daily Mail fear all the time. So I'd be interested to hear the panel's thoughts on how we can move towards more social government, perhaps.
I think within GDS, you have the best people to answer those questions. I mean, looking at some of the people that have been recruited into that team recently, I mean, I'm not even going to begin to try and answer questions that those people could. They're far cleverer than I am. Ewan?
I'm possibly unqualified to answer that because I used to have a T-shirt that said, "Don't vote, it only encourages them." And I also tend to agree with Tom Steinberg, who says instead of trying to fix something that's broken, build something better. And I sometimes worry if I make my living out of shoring up dinosaurs, that it would be quicker just to shoot. And it's possibly the same with government. I think there's a potential for us to democratise things in a very different way that may not be possible for the current incumbents to consider.
I can only relate my own personal experience, well, professional experience. We're working with a big government department, and there are some really enlightened people there. And I'm happy that they're not those people as well, because I worry about elite groups in small kind of places. Like, I think there's progression happening everywhere. You used to live in Brighton Hove, I don't know if you still do, but one of the first things the new IT director did, a local government organisation, a council, which should be as kind of reactionary and old school and decrepit as they come. First thing he did was take off the firewall, restricting council employees from using the social web. I think the seeds of change are there. I think they will be slower. So I think you've got kind of agile corporations, and then you've got pharma and finance and regulated places. And then I think government, unfortunately, tends to come next. But you're close to it. You must be seeing it as well. Maybe it'd be good to hear your perspective.
Okay. I think GDS are doing very big things, but there is a bit of an issue about they are potentially seen as a bit of an elite, and it is going to be about rolling the skills out further and wider. It does depend a lot on the minister. It depends a lot on who's heading up that department, and if they're down with it. William Hague in the Foreign Office, fantastic. Other places, not so much. I suspect it might take a generational shift of politicians.
It's such an interesting point. We haven't talked about leadership explicitly today, and it's a massive topic for me, I think, and followership as well, which is the kind of flip side. But I'd love to get into that, but we can't.
There's an interesting point about the Daily Mail, though, because with GDS, yes, totally take your point that it is an elite group, force, I think we should call them. They are modelling, that real sort of R&D model of how to do government IT properly, super quick, super cheap in relative terms, with a really invested, intelligent, clever, empowered group of people. And maybe if that gets picked up by the Daily Mail as a success story, that might act as encouragement for the rest. So it will be more of that and less of going to the behemoth consultancy companies swallowing up millions and millions of pounds of taxpayers' money. There we go. Thank you very much, everybody. I'm going to hand back over to Sam Michelle from Chinmo, but thank you, and to the panel, and thank you for your questions.
Can we get
cheers.
Aniban? There's a phone to be won.
Just checked, and someone pretty much hit it straight on the head. I hope they're here. It's Twitter handle Stringer Helen James. Yes, you won it. Come on up. And you have won yourself. Oh, it's a lovely pink Lumia. You're welcome. Thank you.
What was the number?
It was 500,000, roughly 500,000 conversations every month we monitor, and that's purely Nokia focused. So if there's a conversation going around it, that's kind of what we have to.
We haven't got the phone. We don't want to hear.
Yeah. Whatever. Brilliant. Well, a massive thank you to the panel. We've also got some sarnies and stuff outside, so if you want to continue the conversation, grab a bite to eat, have a natter. I'm sure the panel will be around. And can we end with a big round of applause for the panel? Thanks very much.